To give a presentation for Dendrobium, specifically the soft cane Dendrobiums for you guys. Now I should have a slide up, but however, the TV is not working with me really, so you guys will have to suffer with me going there. So for those who haven't known us, we were born and raised in Vietnam, and then when we moved here, we have to leave all of the orchids that we've grown behind, and we have to start over. And when we first want to collect, to make a new collection here, we want the species that were not available here, that none of the other growers at that time were willing to bring in because they were finicky and there was no market for them. So we have to gather our paperwork and bring them in ourselves, and that's how we start Florida Orchid House. And then it turned out a lot of the other growers, like you guys, hobbyists, want the same variety as we did. So we start sharing them out, and it would leave us to here we are right now. One of our specialties is Dendrobiums, specifically soft cane Dendrobiums, and this is why we're giving out the presentation now. Typically, Dendrobiums are divided into 6 sections, including Dendrobium, which is a soft cane variety. The one that you see having the downward cascading pendulous kind of growth pattern. This one is just growing up because I stake it up. And then there's the other 5 sections of Dendrobium, including Dendrobium phalaenopsis, which produce the flowers very similar to the phalaenopsis, round and kind of like this, right? This is Dendrobium phalaenopsis. And then there's the formosa, which produce hairs on the stems, also grow upward. And then there's the calista type that has the bloom. The plant actually grow up, but the bloom cascade down into clusters. Some of you have seen it before. Typically have the yellow color. And then there is there's the antelope that produced the 2 horns going upward, typically twisted. So today we're talking about, but all of the 5 grow upward. Only the soft cane actually grow downward, so they cascade down. So that's how you identify a soft cane Dendrobium, is by the growing pattern of it, going down instead of straight up naturally. Okay? And it will be looking very similar to this. It grows upward. It grows upward. Okay? So where do these Dendrobium come from? The majority of soft cane Dendrobiums are found in Southeast Asia. So we're thinking China, India, Philippines, Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan, New Guinea, those kind of countries. And they span over very diverse natural habitat, including tropical, subtropical, and temperate regions. Okay? They are typically found growing on limbs and branches of trees. And even though they have very diverse natural habitat, the common characteristics is they're typically exposed to either very bright light or almost direct sunlight. So medium to very bright light, and they always have those climates always have very wet or rainy season in the spring and summer, and then a drier season in the winter, which gives out the rest period as us growers try to mimic, right? So in order to grow these guys successfully for any species in general, before you start putting them into your growing environment, you need to figure out how they grow in the wild. So what kind of condition they're typically exposed to. Now we know that soft cane typically are exposed to bright light, and they want a very rainy spring and summer, and then drier winter. So you would know the active growing season. The growth cycle is typically divided into 2 phases. The active growing season, spring to the end of typically October, when temperatures start dropping, is go on to the resting season, okay? So in the active growing season, whatever growth you get out of the year is whatever you have for the plants. They only grow for 1 year, each of the new growths. So if we look at this plant right here, this is the new growth, right? Each of the new growths only grows for 1 year, and then after the active growing period, they'll go into the resting period. You will see them dropping leaves. They'll be going bare in the winter, and that's the resting period. So they don't grow anymore. They do not elongate. They do not fatten up. They do not do any of that anymore. So whatever growth you put onto them in the active growing season is all that you have. And those would be the stored energy that would help produce blooms for them in the following spring. Following? Yeah? So we recommend, and this is how we grow ours, when the temperatures start rising, about February or March, and then up until when they start dropping in about November, October, December, we would water and fertilize extensively, as much as you can, and that basically means we water and fertilize them daily, every single day. That's a lot. It sounds like a lot, but that is what the soft cane dendrobiums wants. And in the winter, now, how many of you sitting here have heard about complete rest idea? Right? What does it mean? People are telling you no water at all, no fertilizer at all, leave it, do whatever it wants for like 3 months in a row, right? Well, if you don't provide any water or nutrients, in that 3 months of the winter, it will use all of the energy stored in the bulb, and it will become wrinkly, shriveling. How many of us have seen that happens when you do the complete rest, right? It all happens like that. So no, complete rest we do not recommend that. You do still need, because imagine, even in the winter, they do not have rain every single day as in the active growing season of spring and summer. They still have dew in the morning, and they still get a little bit of water and nutrients from that. So you do still water and fertilize your orchid. Maybe if you're scared, you can forget about the fertilizing. But watering to keep them fat and nice, to help them hold on to those energy to bloom in spring is a must. You do need to water about once every 2 weeks or once every 10 days. Make sure, give them enough to avoid the shriveling, to avoid the wrinkling, okay? That way, in the spring, when the blooming season comes, they have enough energy to bloom. We grow, how many of us attend the Martin County show when I have the huge dendrobiums up, anosmium up for display that was gigantic, right? A lot of people ask me, including a lot of the judges as well, how do I grow them? How do we grow them so beautifully? It's just because we don't give them complete rest, right? You know what they do. No complete resting, okay? That is starving. That's starving, basically. No starving.
and also resting during winter. Also fertilizer too?
Very.
Water and fertilizer too?
Yes.
During winter time?
Yes. So in the winter, when you do still fertilize and water, but reduce by about 60% of what you typically do. Because they're resting, so they're not actively transforming all of those fertilizer into nutrients. So if you continue with your heavy fertilizing and watering regime, then what happens would be the plant will get rot, okay? And that's also another thing. The reason why we cut down watering and fertilizing is so that when the cold snap comes, if the media in the pot is wet and damp, then even though the air temperature is 50 degrees, it feels on the surface of the root in those wet, dampened media, it feels like 45 or 40. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it will lead to damage, and that's what we want to avoid. If I know if there's going to be a temperature dive in about 3 days from now, I will not water for that 3 days. Okay? But then if we know, it's going to be warm and nice out, then you continue to water and fertilizer as long as the temperature is a little warmer. Warmer basically means anything above 70 degrees. Okay? And I mean not like 70 degrees for the whole day, 70 degrees for the afternoon, for example, 70 degrees for the morning, for example, okay? But the point being said here is that you don't need to do complete rest. And a lot of the time, it's a safe way of doing it because a lot of people, you're afraid that when you water them or fertilize them, you will rot them out. So rather starve them than kill them, right? Which is the reason why people tell you to starve your plants because they're so afraid you will kill them. But if you know how much you give in, you would not kill them. So, but you will actually be growing them. Does it make sense? Yeah? So instead of rotting them out, people rather you just starve them, but they will still be alive. But now you don't want them to just be alive. You want them to be nice. You want them to be able to put them into your show in the spring, right? So that's what you would do. You would water just enough to keep them from shriveling. Water just enough to keep them from drying out, you know? Which is safe once every 2 weeks, okay? And then we have of course, when you bring any of the succulent Dendrobiums into your growing environment, either be your backyard or your little tiny greenhouse at the back, you want to find a good spot for them. And you want to find a spot that has medium to bright light with good air circulation. And of course, where you can hit them with water every so often. They are very heavy feeder, especially for the active growing season. Fertilize, if you guys already have, some of you already have succulent Dendrobiums, try fertilize them a lot. Try a lot. Now we can be so scared, so increase one by one and then you will see a significant difference in your plants growing a lot larger, a lot faster, and then increase more. But typically we recommend half strength. So whatever fertilizer you use, if it said on the label 1 tablespoon per gallon, put in half tablespoon per gallon and use that mixture of water to fertilize the plants every day or every other day for the whole active season up until the temperatures start dropping in September, October to be safe, okay? Potting media. Now if we like to water a lot, if we like to water every single day, we can go with regular bark mix, especially if we have had rotting problems before, meaning we have very high humidity and we water a lot in addition, then we should go with bark mix. But if we have not had rotting problem before, but instead our plants never grow 6 feet long, they never blooms crazily, then we're having a drying problem rather than a rotting problem, so you would want to pot them in sphagnum moss. Propagation of the succulent Dendrobiums. There are two. You have either rhizome divisions, meaning you, just like Cattleya, you pull it out and then you separate it by the rhizome, right? Where the stems connected to each other, or kikis. Because these guys, the succulent Dendrobium actually produce kikis or babies growth on the stem, the node, typically the one that has not bloomed. So after the blooming season, the node that produces the flowers tend to be done. And then the node that has not produced the flowers will produce the baby plant. And that's one way of getting a baby out of them. Wait for the babies to produce a root about 1 or 2 inches long to be able to sustain themselves. Then you can break them off from the model plant and put them into a separate pot. Okay? And the general characteristic of these guys are they are deciduous. So in the winter, they will drop all of their leaves, which is absolutely very normal. They're not dying, they're not having any health problems. That's just their normal life cycle. They drop all of their leaves, getting ready to bloom in the spring. So each of the cane you see here, each of the nodes where the bloom where the bloom is in the spring, there used to be a leaf there, right? So they drop and then they bloom. So as you see the temperature dropping, that's one sign of the resting period. But when you see the leaves actually falling off, that means getting very close. That's when you reduce your water and fertilizer the most. And then when the blooms comes out is when you start watering more. So when you see actual bud developing, you water to about once or twice a week. And then when the buzz is done and you see new growth, every single day. All of the soft cane Dendrobium are extremely fragrant, which is one of the best characteristics of this variety of orchid. Now, do we have any questions? Am I boring everybody out?
Yes.
No.
Do you use Epsom salts at all?
Yes. So we do use Epsom salt, but not only for the soft cane Dendrobium, but for any Dendrobium in general, because the Epsom salt will,
Magnesium.
it will provide magnesium for the plants.
It'll do what?
Magnesium.
Yes, magnesium. You can use Epsom salt to provide magnesium. It's just like some of us using the expensive CalMac fertilizer, right?
Mhm.
Do you dilute it or do you just put powder around?
No, you dilute it. So typically for us, when we use Epsom salt, we typically use once a month, and we put them into the sprinkler system. So every single plant have them once a month. It's kind of like a supplement. Yes.
Mix it, how much?
I'm sorry?
How much Epsom salt?
How much Epsom salt? For the rate of applying for your plants, we have an injection system, so we go 2%, but that really isn't what you guys are going to be doing. So I would just recommend, maybe 1 teaspoon per gallon.
Say 1 tablespoon.
Teaspoon, not tablespoon, teaspoon.
Depends on where.
Yes.
A teaspoon, not a tablespoon?
Not a tablespoon. Tablespoon is for fertilizer for the soft cane because they're a heavy feeder. But as far as Epsom salt go or any supplement go, we would only recommend 1 teaspoon per gallon.
What about mounting them?
We grow a lot of them mounting as well, but when you mount them, you have to make sure that you water every single day a lot because they dry out very, very fast. And mounting actually gives out a really artistic effect where it would, cascade down. They do not go all directions around the pot, and it's easier for you to put them up anywhere you want to. So mounting works very well for these guys, especially when they produce very small, fine roots. Any kind of orchid that produce small, fine roots are very good for mounting. Yes.
The Dendrobiums I have are not noble, so they do not drop their leaves. Would the watering be the same in the winter?
You're saying nobile? Nobile orchid, Dendrobium nobile?
No, I do not drop their leaves on my Dendrobium.
So the Dendrobium, so how is it growing? Is it growing directly up or is it growing cascade down?
Up.
It's growing upward. So we're talking about one of the other 5 sections of Dendrobiums. The hard cane Dendrobium, right? Those are evergreen, kind of like evergreen. They don't drop their leaves in the winter. For those guys, they do not have a specific resting season in the winter. No, they don't. But you still want to reduce just to avoid damage with the cold temperature droppings. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I have one of those ones that it droops down.
Yes.
It's quite long, covered with blossoms.
Yes.
And leaves.
Yes.
It dropped the blossoms, it dropped the leaves. Are you saying that's never going to have leaves and blossoms again?
Yes, exactly. That is the soft cane Dendrobiums. Once they grow and in the winter they sprout the new growth in spring, growth all the way to winter, drop all the leaves in the winter, bloom in the following spring. And then after the blooms are done in fall, those cane would just serve as energy storage for the plant. And then what those cane will do is they'll push all of the nutrients inside to growth, the new growth. That will be, yes, that will be, or kikis, exactly. But they would never grow any leaves
I was
or
hoping
blooms
something
again.
would come back, but it's never gonna come back.
No, but it will produce something else. Yes.
Do you ever cut the canes?
Do I ever have?
Cut the canes.
Do we ever cut off those canes? Yes, we do. You do cut them off when they get dry, and when they get dried, then you cut them off because it would be just irritating to your eyes. you want to enter it in a show and you want the judge to be wow and not looking at those dry canes. Yes.
How do you spell the name of that dendrobium you're calling? The one that drops the leaves, the one you're talking
In
about?
general, we call them soft cane dendrobium. There are many species that belong to this section. The most popular one is Dendrobium anosmum. Anosmum.
Called cane because of the stem.
I'm sorry?
It's called cane because of the stem.
Yes, soft cane. Cane meaning that's the growing stem. So almost all Dendrobium grows with the cane, right? But then the hard cane is the one that the cane is hard. It's self-explanatory kind of thing. So if it goes straight up and you could really bend it, it's hard cane. If it grows downward and it's kind of soft and kind of like a rope, then you get to swing it around. It's a soft cane dendrobium. But typically just the growth pattern. So downward versus upward, soft versus erect up, okay? Any questions?
This one is the dendrobium. What is it?
This is probably the Dendrobium novelty. It is a soft cane dendrobium. But that plant is just too small. The kiki is just too small, so that's why they haven't produced the long stem yet. So you haven't seen the flexibility in the cane yet.
This is the same?
Yeah.
This is a dendrobium.
Dendrobium, yes.
This man inside was saying this was another,
That is a dendrobium. It looks like a dendrobium. I could. Do we have any other questions? No questions? Thank you so much for listening to me.